Coming up, the Heat make a late comeback against the Suns, and the Hornets finally snap their losing streak. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I am your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Make sure that you subscribe to Locked On NBA on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. We have our Locked On hosts here. They are ready to recap all of the action for you from last night. Start out with Toronto and Detroit. Without Pascal Siakam or Fred VanVleet out there, the Toronto Raptors turned to Dalano Batnon, of all people, who scored 27 points in a win on the road over the Pistons. Locked On Raptors is pumped after a rather unexpected win, while Locked On Pistons is concerned after Detroit's Isaiah Stewart left early.
It's Dalano Batton's world, and we all just live in it. Sean Woodley here from Locked On Raptors to break down the Toronto Raptors' 115-111 win over the Detroit Pistons in Detroit on Monday night. And the big takeaway from this one is that the Raptors survived this game somehow because of Dalano Batnon. They came into this game without Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, their two best offensive players, as well as Gary Trent Jr., a third starter, and Precious Achiuwa, one of their 7 best players and one of their 3 best defenders. It was pretty grim. They also lost Otto Porter Jr. at halftime of this one to a foot injury, and so it was on the shoulders of Dalano Batnon, the second-year, former second-round pick, and he had himself a career night. 27 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks, and 1 victory for the Raptors, in spite of all the injuries, in spite of rough nights offensively and defensively from Scotty Barnes, and a bit of an uneven shooting performance from OG Anunoby, the 2 guys right there who were supposed to kind of carry the day. It was not those guys, it was Dalano freaking Batnon, who will certainly be in Nick Nurse's rotation plans going forward, even more so than he has been so far this season after a brilliant effort on Monday night to steal the Raptors a win. The Raptors now play just 3 games over the next 11 days after a very busy stretch. Hopefully they can start to get some bodies back here, but if not, Dalano Batton's there. They're going to be fine, right? I'll have more broken down on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Raptors. Be sure to tune in.
Tough, close loss to the Toronto Raptors for the Detroit Pistons tonight. Host of the Locked On Pistons podcast, Ku Kahil here. The Pistons switched up their starting lineup tonight with the return of Marvin Bagley. They started Marvin Bagley and Isaiah Stewart in the front court and sent Saddiq Bey to the bench for him to play a 6-man role. I'm interested to see if that's how they continue to play it moving forward. But that may not matter at all because Isaiah Stewart ended up suffering a foot sprain in the second quarter and did not return the second half. We'll have to see when he's returning, how many games he's going to end up missing, or they end up going to have to put Saddiq Bey back into the starting lineup, all that stuff. But what I really want to focus on is, listen, LCA needs to go ahead and put a ban on any game against the Toronto Raptors. Put a ban that no one outside a 50-mile radius of Detroit can purchase tickets to a game against the Toronto Raptors, because there was more Raptors fans than the Pistons fans tonight against the Toronto Raptors, and I feel like that's every single game against the Raptors. It's like that. I hate listening to it through the TV. I'm sure everyone at the game hates seeing it. I'm sure the players can't stand it. So, LCA, put a ban on some of these games against the Toronto Raptors, man. It's getting ridiculous.
The Miami Heat went on a crucial 12-0 run in the fourth quarter to catch up with the Suns late. Then Jimmy Butler, playing some D, blocked Devin Booker's last shot to secure the win for Miami. Locked On Heat and Suns have all of the details for you from that exciting finish.
The Miami Heat get their best win of the season thanks to a huge Jimmy Butler block on Devin Booker and a huge night from Bam Adebayo. I'm Wes Goldberg with Locked On Heat. The Heat beat the Suns 113-112 on Monday night, coming back from 13 points down in the fourth quarter, taking the lead on a pair of Bam Adebayo free throws, and then, with 6.2 seconds to go and the Suns with the ball, Devin Booker rose up for a mid-range jumper to win the game, but Jimmy Butler went up with him, blocking Booker's shot with his left hand to seal the come-from-behind win, and a much-needed one for the Miami Heat. It's without a doubt the Heat's best win of the season, and the Heat have now won 3 straight and gotten to 500 for the first time this season. 30 points for Bam Adebayo, including 12 in the final 7 minutes, 16 points, 13 rebounds, and 7 assists for Jimmy Butler, and 7 Heat players scoring in double figures. With more on the game, including a breakdown on Bam's big night and what the Heat can take away from this one defensively, check out Locked On Heat on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Phoenix Suns end a disappointing 1-3 road trip with a heartbreaking loss in Miami on Monday night, 113-112. Brendan Clean here with Locked On Suns coming to you after this loss. The Suns moved to 8-5. The difference in this game, bottom line, is the center spot. Bam Adebayo, 14 points in the fourth quarter to close out this game for Miami. 14 trips to the free throw line, 30 points overall. You look at DeAndre Ayton, 5 fouls, which has been a problem for him all year. Only 16 points and no free throw attempts for Ayton. Obviously, you can look at some other things in terms of free throws, three-point shooting, etc. At the end of the day, the Suns did not have their max center step up. The Heat did, and Miami gets the win. For more on these Suns, listen to Locked On Suns wherever you get podcasts.
The Hornets' 8-game losing streak came to an end last night in Orlando. It wasn't really pretty, but a win is a win, and they will take anything at this point in Charlotte. Locked On Hornets is not complaining. Meanwhile, Locked On Magic says Orlando needs the discipline to finish off these games.
Well, it wasn't pretty, but it doesn't have to be when you're ending a big losing streak. I'm Doug Branson of the Locked On Hornets podcast. The Charlotte Hornets get a win, something they haven't done in quite a while, this time over the Orlando Magic. 112-105, that ends an 8-game losing streak, and it also avenges a loss to the Orlando Magic earlier in the season. They do it on the defensive end of the floor. 15 steals for the Hornets. That's a season high. 6 steals for Kelly Oubre Jr. That's a career high. Helped get the Hornets into transition because their half-court offense still doesn't look very good. They were 7 of 35 from the three-point line, 0 of 6 for Kelly Oubre, 1 of 8 for Terry Rozier, 4 of 15 for LaMelo Ball, who seems to still be shaking off some rust, though he did have 9 assists in this game, helped to get the team into transition. They'll hope to start a winning streak against the Indiana Pacers at home in their next game. For more on the Charlotte Hornets, make sure you're following Locked On Hornets wherever you get podcasts.
The Orlando Magic put themselves in a hole, and they have no one to blame but themselves. This is Philip Rossman-Reich, the host of Locked On Magic, and the Orlando Magic fall to the Charlotte Hornets 112-107 in a game that, at least on paper, looked like one that they should win against a healthier Charlotte Hornets team, but one on an 8-game losing streak coming into Orlando with the chance for the Magic to have a winning homestand. Look, the Magic's problem has always been consistency. It's going to be a problem throughout the course of the season as a young team learning how to win and learning how to play in this league. We said throughout the course of the weekend that the biggest test would be coming out with the right focus in this game. The Magic did not do that. From the very start, they turned the ball over. They gave up offensive rebounds. They did everything that they absolutely cannot do, especially against a team like Charlotte, if they want to win. Most of the Magic's problems throughout the course of the season have been their own mistakes, their own lack of execution, their own turnovers. And things are going to continue to struggle until the Magic fix them.
Coming up, the Celtics make a big fourth quarter comeback. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA. Today's edition of Locked On Game to Game is brought to you by Sweat Block. There is nothing worse than dealing with embarrassing sweat, whether you are at work or if you're out on the town. That is where Sweat Block comes in. Sweat Block wipes were invented by a doctor, and they are guaranteed to work or you don't pay. They call it the Sweat Block Dry Shirt Guarantee. If Sweat Block doesn't keep you dry, you get your money back. If you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweater odor, try Sweat Block risk-free today. You save 20% with promo code LOCKEDON at sweatblock.com. Also available on Amazon. Welcome back to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Marcus Smart went off in the fourth and helped Boston make a comeback to beat the Oklahoma City Thunder. Both Locked On Celtics and Thunder recap how things played out in the TD Garden.
It only took 1 quarter of effort for the Celtics to get the win over the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm John Corrales from the Locked On Celtics podcast at the TD Garden, where Marcus Smart's 10 fourth quarter points was enough to get the Celtics, who looked listless. Their defense was terrible. Their rebounding was terrible. They couldn't hit a shot from 3. It was just awful through 3 quarters. Smart's 10 points in the fourth saved the Celtics, as well as the defense finally showing up. Started out late in the third with Peyton Pritchard and Derek White. They got a couple of late steals to propel the Celtics, and then that fourth quarter defense was just enough. Really, it was a perfect Oklahoma City game. They looked great through 3. They collapsed in the fourth, so they show some promise and lose. The Celtics get their 7th straight win. Now they head off to a tough road trip, and I'll talk about it on the Locked On Celtics podcast.
The Oklahoma City Thunder fall to the Boston Celtics in the TD Garden, but I'm here at Paycom Center after the Blue just beat the Ignite. But in Boston, Oklahoma City got a huge game from SGA with 37 points, and Alexei Pokusevski had a fantastic game in Boston. I'm Rylan Stiles, host of Locked On Thunder, and the big storyline from today's game is the Thunder are young. the second youngest team in NBA history, only ahead of last year's Thunder team, and the youth showed, and they could not close out this game. We'll talk about it on Locked On Thunder.
The Hawks beat the Bucks for the second time in as many meetings, this time a 15-point victory after winning by 19 last week. Both Locked On Hawks and Bucks explain how Atlanta has beaten Milwaukee so badly twice in a row.
Hello, friends. My name is Brad Rowland, and the Atlanta Hawks go on the road and knock off the Milwaukee Bucks by a 15-point margin on this Monday evening. The Bucks were leading the East coming into the night, and the Hawks took care of business in two-way fashion. The offense was really good for Atlanta on the road, dissecting the Bucks inside and outside. Not a great three-point shooting night for the Hawks necessarily, but they were definitely attacking the rim, getting to the free throw line, taking care of the ball, and a pretty balanced effort as well. All five starters with 16 points or more for Atlanta. And on defense, they took advantage of Milwaukee's shortcomings. No Drew Holiday in this one for the Bucks, and the Hawks were able to sort of hold serve and really defend the rim very effectively with Clint Capella and John Collins. And the Hawks just played well across the board. An impressive performance on the road as an underdog, and the Hawks will sort of, I guess, try to follow that up with a challenge on Wednesday against the Boston Celtics. We'll have more on that game and everything else going on in Hawks land on the Locked On Hawks podcast.
The Bucks go down to the Hawks 121-106 on a night where it felt like the injuries really started to catch up with the Bucks. My name's Kane Pittman. I'm the host of the Locked On Bucks podcast. Still no Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday in this game. Pat Connaughton and Joe Ingles still sidelined. And then Grayson Allen went down with an ankle in the first half. Wesley Matthews with a hamstring in the third quarter. So seriously shorthanded this Bucks team, and they shot 20% from three. That is not going to help. But there was a big positive, and there's been a positive the last few games. Marjon Beauchamp, the rookie, continues to impress. Career high 20 points, 8 rebounds to go alongside it. And he just does all the little things that you know Mike Budenholzer loves, and also Giannis will love. He rebounds, he hustles, he runs in transition. So Marjon Beauchamp, clearly a shining light for the Bucks in this loss. We're going to break it down on the Locked On Bucks podcast. Join us wherever you get your podcasts.
The Warriors did not pull any punches yesterday. They were up 30 before the fourth quarter even started against the Spurs. Our Locked On Warriors host tells you how Golden State dominated San Antonio.
The pool party was raging at Chase Center tonight. I'm Cyrus Satzes with your Locked On Warriors Locked On Now recap of the defending world champions getting back on track in the win column following a 132-95 blowout victory over the San Antonio Spurs. Jordan Poole was the story in this one, starting in place of Klay Thompson, who was resting in the second game of a back-to-back. Poole scored 36 points on 13 of 20 shooting, including 5 of 10 from beyond the arc in just 29 minutes of play. And equally encouraging was Steve Kerr playing Moses Moody 26 minutes, Jonathan Kuminga 25 minutes, and JaMychal Green 16 minutes, with each player contributing solid numbers. Kerr might have found his second unit in tonight's game. The Warriors improved to 6-8 on the year and look for the first road victory of the season Wednesday when they travel to Phoenix to take on the Suns. Kylan Mills joins me tomorrow, and Mark Spears of ESPN joins me on Wednesday's show. Follow the program on Twitter at Locked On Dubs.
That's all for today on Locked On Game to Game NBA. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Make sure that you subscribe to Locked On NBA and, of course, your team's Locked On podcast on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.